Council. We are one of regional action councils across the state that together are known as the Connecticut Prevention Network. And we support local level substance abuse prevention and mental health promotion efforts under the Department of Mental Health and Addiction Services Prevention Unit. So my role here in your community is to provide support to SMART, Salisbury and Middlebury Acting Responsibly Together, which is your local prevention council and your host for this evening, along with wonderful Region 15 public schools. And so Noelle, your fearless leader, asked me to do the welcoming remarks. So I just want to make sure that we acknowledge the executive committee of SMART. So with Noelle, Federle, Karina Fisher-DeCramer, Joy, Cangelosi, and Jules Holt, just stand up for us. I know you guys are hiding in the back, right? So these are some of the muscle of your local prevention council, if you will, and you have a wonderful, wonderful representation of key community stakeholders in both Salisbury and Middlebury who support all of the efforts around substance abuse prevention and mental health promotion and health and wellness in general here in your community on a volunteer basis. I cover prevention for 12 towns, and I've been doing this work for a long time, and local prevention councils naturally wax and wane. There are some times when local prevention councils are all engines firing and full steam ahead, and there are other times when local prevention councils are kind of limping along. I can't say that about yours. SMART has been working very hard and has improved their stakeholder presence, has collaborated with multiple community sectors, and make sure that they address the spectrum of health and wellness in their efforts in your community. They are always looking for and in need of additional passionate volunteers. So if you are so inclined, please let Noelle know if you're interested in becoming a member of SMART, receiving information about SMART, or learning more about these kinds of events that happen in your community. I'd also like, if there are any other members of SMART here in the audience, would you just stand for a moment so we can recognize you? I know I see at least one in the audience. Oh, come on. Don't be shy. So thank you so much for our Board of Education member as well, and the Board of Education and Superintendent Botsford for being one of our supporters and one of our sponsors for this evening. So I mentioned Department of Mental Health and Addiction Services, my agency, Region 15 and SMART, and I'd now like to tell you, I'm very excited to tell you about your wonderful presenter this evening. Dr. Yifra Kaminer is a child and adolescent psychiatrist who joined UConn Health Center in 1993 from Brown University in Providence, Rhode Island. Dr. Kaminer's main clinical interests and research lie in the spectrum of adolescent high-risk behaviors, and in particular, he focuses on the assessment and treatment of substance use disorders and psychiatric comorbidity and suicidal behavior. Dr. Kaminer is also a senior investigator at the Injury Prevention Center of the Connecticut Children's Medical Center in Hartford, where he has been involved in research of adolescent risky driving and youth suicide prevention at the emergency department there. Dr. Kaminer has been teaching on youth substance use disorders at UConn Health, Institute of Living, and Yale Child Study Center. He's received funding for his research through NIDA, NIAAA, CSAT, and the Donahue Foundation, all heavy hitters in the field of substance abuse prevention. Dr. Kaminer is on the board of several peer-reviewed journals. He's authored and or edited 5 books and over 150 articles and book chapters. Dr. Kaminer has been a guest editor of several peer-reviewed journals on the topic of adolescent substance abuse, and most recently, the Substance Abuse Journal. He's also recently published books including Adolescent Substance Abuse, Psychiatric Comorbidity, and High-Risk Behaviors, and there's information about those books at the back tables for you. And he also has been involved in brief telephone continuing care therapy for adolescents, which is a newer field. And he's also been involved with the Clinical Manual of Adolescent Substance Abuse Treatment and Youth Substance Abuse and Co-occurring Disorders, which was published in the fall of 2015 by the American Psychiatric Publication. So Dr. Kaminer has tremendous, tremendous credit and Merritt, and you're going to hear a wonderful, wonderful presentation from him. Before he begins, I just want to let you know there is going to be a brief intermission after he's speaking so that you can get up, stretch your legs, use the facilities, and maybe write down or jot down some questions you may have on index cards that the SMART members will have, or just kind of digest your thoughts and think about what it is you want to ask specifically about adolescent brain development and high-risk behavior. So with that, please help me give a warm welcome to our very, very special guest, Dr. Yifran Kami.
Well, I have 5 bottles of water here, so I guess I won't get dehydrated. It's good to know. So you might be wondering why do we have this slide on? Well, anybody knows anything about the Baha'i religion? I'm not proselytizing or anything, I just want to know if anybody knows it. Good. Actually, it's very interesting. I was in Haifa, Israel last week at the conference on behavioral addictions, like smartphone addiction, all of things you all suffer from. I'm going to talk about it later. So it was so nice that you sit on the tiny mountain overlooking this temple of a very eclectic religion established 200 years ago that took the best from all religions, from Christianity, Judaism, Islam, and Buddhism. They also decided to build a temple in Haifa, so they wanted to compete with the rush hour stampede in Jerusalem that everybody claims is theirs. And all these beautiful gardens that are almost like Versailles-like, actually it's much broader, are being cultivated by the worshippers. People come, spend a few weeks there, they don't get paid, they don't give money, they walk the land, they also have library and stuff like that. So it's kind of neat. I just wanted to share this with you. And of course, down there is the Mediterranean. It's a beautiful area. And I wanted you kind of to enjoy serenity now for 30 seconds, because from now on, it's all downhill. Problems, angst, all the tourists in the world that you came to hear about. So this is kind of the official title of the presentation. And this is most probably a better title. Why don't they get it, or why don't we get it? Because, you know, this generation gap is both a blessing and a curse, but this is part of development. I must kind of warn you, my presentation is not for the faint at heart, and anybody who at some point would like to leave and get his money, or money back can leave, there's no money involved. I do it as a community service, but I'm very opinionated. I think that sometimes we need to take leadership based on science. We need to admit that it's a moving target, that things change, but we need to understand where we're coming from and where we're going. I don't have one of my favorite slides, but anybody remember what the caterpillar told Alice in Wonderland when she asked for directions? He said, if you don't know where you're going, any way will take you there. However, of course, the American version attributed to Yogi Berra says, if you don't know where you're going, you may never get there. So I want to make sure that we know where we're going, and that everything we do from prevention to treatment and continued care makes sense. And that's why I'm here. So this is kind of cute. I'm not a super expert on behavioral addictions. There's so many different addictions right now. You know, from substance, which we all know, to behavioral that's becoming more and more common. You know, started with pathological gambling, internet occupation, sexual addiction, and of course, smartphone addiction. And I want to see how many people here are able to forget the phone at home, not rush back and get it, or just play with it all the time, because we are definitely getting addicted to our technology. And I read a very interesting article about some experts who are trying to make apps more and more addictive. So we live in a very interesting world, and basically we are prey to a lot of smart people who would like you to use this stuff more and more and more and more. And during one of my, we had a conference in New Orleans, and I like to go to bookstores wherever there are still bookstores, you know, like newspaper and stuff. And there's a beautiful book that I ran into, a children's book called No Cell Phone Day, written by one of the Marcellus brothers. You know, Marcellus that you guys know, the saxophone player that used to play for Jay Leno. And this is a very cute story about a girl. She plays for her birthday, and she wanted to go out and spend all day with her parents, but she didn't. She wanted them not to use the phone all day and give her full attention. How many of us can do it these days? So the book was kind of. It's nice to look at stuff like this, and suddenly, you know, it puts life in perspective. So that's apropos in terms of behavioral addiction, and I listen to a lot of smart people from different countries that do all kind of amazing studies on behavioral addictions. Now, who are we, or who am I to some degree? I'm with Yukon Health Center, Department of Psychiatry, Department of Pediatrics. My team conducts usually federally funded research on treatment outcome. Presently, we have a study, very unique study actually. We are providing free of charge treatment, confidential, state-of-the-art, for adolescents up to age 21 who have substance use disorders as well as co-occurring depression, which is quite common actually. And as you may imagine, people also suffer from depression and substance abuse are at increased risk for suicidal and self-injurious behavior as well. So this study is in the middle now. We are approaching the middle of this part-time study. There are some brochures over there. If any one of you know anybody that might benefit from you know, contacting us and finding us eligibility, that would be great. If you want more information while I'm here, I'll be happy during the intermission to provide you with this information. We most recently finished another study where the focus was on adolescents who are poor responders to treatment, meaning adolescents who have cannabis use disorder but do not respond well to treatment. And the question is, how do we work with the poor responders? You know, in general, in mental health or even in general health, our concern as a community is with the high utilizers. I mean, let's say that in terms of depression, for example, that 20% of the population use 80% of the resources. It's very similar in other disorders because those people who are difficult to treat or don't respond well to treatment, the treatment is more costly in terms of resources. So we decided to focus on the poor responders to treatment. Now the objectives in general are kind of to make it very clear. I want to emphasize that adolescents are not miniature adults. They are very different creatures because they are in the developmental stage, and I'm going to address these issues. I want people to understand that almost in any program that we are having right now, there is not enough emphasis on the developmental perspectives. Right now we're in the midst of 3 public health crises, CS, in terms of mental health and addiction. One of them is increase in suicidality in the last 5 or 6 years. The other one is the high rate of marijuana use by our youth. And the third one is the opiate addiction, opiate epidemic. In as much as people a lot of time like to rah, but the USA, fortunately, we are good at some things and we are not so great at other things. This is uniquely, although not exclusively, an American epidemic that is not at that magnitude in any other Western country. And it's important to understand these differences. I won't have much time to talk about it today, but if you would like, towards the end, I would address it in a way that is outside of the box, because we usually address things the way we address them all the time. People don't like to think outside of the box, and it's very costly. So regarding adolescents, I wrote a couple of ad-ops. I don't even remember. One was published, the other wasn't. Why the opioid epidemic should be separated for youth versus adults who suffer from chronic pain. And I will address it later if people would be interested. So the bottom line is we need to understand what is an adolescent. Once we understand what is an adolescent, hopefully we will be able to understand how to address adolescent-related issues from a developmental perspective and not address them from an adult perspective. Also, what are the implications for public health policy? For example, legalization of marijuana and all kind of other ideas that I can tell you right now I'm against legalization. And from public health perspective, you need to understand that in any problem that we address, we suffer from what we call the short blanket syndrome. If you pull it to the right, somebody else, is not under the blanket. You pull it to the left, other people are not under the blanket. Usually, the casualties are adolescents and families, because people usually think like adults and about adults, and that definitely creates a lot of problems. I have a second presentation, if I might have time afterwards, a brief one that would give you very concise stuff about what's happening right now in marijuana all over the world. And I am proud to get hate mail every now and then because of my opinions, because it's very common right now. Actually, it goes like this. It's just amazing what's happening right now. Not only here, in other countries. First of all, people try to be polite. So they say, well, regarding your adult, you must probably think like this because you're a servant of the pharmaceutical companies, the alcohol and the tobacco industry. So you don't want the new kid in the block, i.e. the cannabis, marijuana entrepreneurs to get it. Then they start, it's really getting really worse. They say, well, also your interpretation of research is not the right one. Thirdly, your research is trash. And fourthly, now they get to the truth because they lose it. We hate you because you think differently from us. And that's very common, as you know, in different aspects in life. And this is also a concern for all of us raising kids these days, living in a very, very divisive atmosphere. And I'm not going to get into politics right now. Both sides are to blame. But there's no respect to different opinions, and you're not entitled to have a different opinion. And a lot of time you see, especially with adolescents, they live in echo chambers. You need to say what everybody else says, otherwise you're in trouble. And that's too bad, because I have a slide later on talks about the conflict between faith and science. How many hundreds of years we have fought as a Western society to get outside of the wings of religion in order to promote science based on facts. And right now, ideology trumps facts. And people are not interested in the facts. People are interested in the ideology. So the take-home message here is very simple for those who had enough. Adolescents are very smart intellectually. We have mono students here. There are some kids who do amazing things. There's only one problem, that there's a mismatch between the intellectual maturation and the emotional maturation. I'll show you some slides. Why is it so? Meaning that until age 25, until the cortex and the prefrontal cortex finally develop, adolescents are at the mercy of the umbrella of disinhibition, which includes impulsivity, sensation seeking, and all kinds of behaviors that happen before and not after you count to 3. Most adolescents cannot count to 3. They count 0, 1, and immediately do what they do. And how do we know that this is a problem? We know it because in the United States, every year, between the 33,000 young lads between the ages of 15 to 24 perish. 33,000 guys, it's a small city. Take all the wars in wherever you want and multiply them 33,000. Mostly from preventable causes. Car crashes, homicide and suicide, they go 3. Cancer and some infectious diseases are way, way down the list. So if so many people perish because of preventable causes, something is wrong. But we become very callous because we're used to the fact that people die on the roads all the time. But God forbid, one baby flies from a car seat, you have a recall of all the car seats. If it was up to me, I would have a recall of many, many adolescents. In order to fix that, because we are trying to make sure that they reach age 25 relatively in good shape. And that's definitely quite a challenge. And you know it as a parent, when you give the keys to the car and the kids tell you don't worry, that's when you start worrying, right? So it's important to understand this imbalance, and I will explain it even more. And this is a bumper sticker. It's a true bumper sticker that somebody showed me. Why didn't life problems hit me when I was a teenager, when I knew everything? You know, they know everything. You guys don't know much. They know everything. And that's too bad. Now, there is a book that I haven't written, so I can advertise. It's called Bad Moves, written by these two bright researchers on what we call smart drugs. We wrote a very nice review on the use of stimulants for alleged cognitive enhancement. You know, we used to drink a lot of coffee before exams. Now people in high school as well as in the university take Ritalin and some other stimulants because they think that not only does it keep them awake, it also improves their cognitive function. So a lot of stuff is going on in terms of what kids are using these days and how many bad moves they make that at the end basically hurt somebody. So in terms of maturation, very quickly, let's remember the word heterogeneity. We cannot just lump people together, whether they're healthy or suffer from a certain disorder. Whether they have an epilepsy, the epilepsy, schizophrenia, the schizophrenias, heart condition, it's heart conditions. So we need to understand that adolescents mature at a different pace. And you know, you can kind of imagine this bell curve, and some people are close to the center, some people are 1 or 2 standard deviations from the mean. And what does it mean to be 1 or 2 standard deviations from the mean? It depends on what issues we are kind of addressing. Another thing that I want kind of to be opinionated about is how we use the term stress. So what concerns me, I know I'm even being recorded, and I'm not paranoid, right? Somebody's recording my thoughts and whatever I say. Stress is good for you. What is not good for you is if you cannot manage the stress and if you are stressed out. The way individuals and species develop is based on stress. You react to the stress. Those of you who jog, that's stressful activity. Those of you who lift weights, this is stressful activity. But this is something that is manageable. So we improve as individuals when we've been put under pressure and as species. You know, the survival of the fittest and so forth. So a lot of people say, oh, you know, stress is no good. No, stress is fine, as long as it is manageable. So we need to understand that adolescents go through a stressful period of development. It ain't necessarily all negative. Now, the purpose of adolescence, it's a developmental period, the last one before they become adults, to prepare them for adulthood. But the question is this preparation healthy, traumatic? Where does it put the individual during the process? It also depends, if I'm driving a car, what mechanism they're using. Adolescents are very narcissistic. You can say it's terrible, but on the other hand, they need to be narcissistic in order to, you know, improve their self-esteem. Adolescents like to experiment, and some of these experiments end up causing them and other people damage, but it's a certain rite of passage. So the question is, what should we consider as positive or healthy experimentation? And is it just based on the results or the consequences? what we should or shouldn't tell them in terms of prevention. Do you need to experiment with anything in order to understand what is it is? Or maybe you can learn from other people's experience. So there's a lot of intricate issues about what and how we should kind of draw a roadmap for our kids. And I want to tell you, by the way, some people who come out from my presentation pumped up and go home to the adolescent kid and say, I heard an expert today. He said everything that I believe in, and from now on things are going to change. Yeah, right. Kids at 16, 17 are not going to change, definitely not dramatically. However, start raising your kids as early as possible, you know what I mean? So the process of building their confidence, having trust in you and what you say somehow would be at your benefit. I live in West Hartford, and we used to have a friendly in the center of town. I took my kids there when they were young, and you know, all the adolescents used to hang out there Friday night. You know, it's not easy to be my kids, be kind of a lab rat of a child psychiatrist with a researcher, as my kids, tell you I know nothing about parenting. So I told them, if you see these kids, what do you think about it? If they're loud and misbehave, I said, look, you're going to behave like them too. I said, no, we won't. I said, you will, but I'm going to throw into your brain right now a post-hypnotic suggestion. And you will reach their age and behave like this, and do something like this, or say something, and you will start behaving. And I always remind them of this story when they became adolescents, that something is happening when you're an adolescent, and then the elders of the tribe opinion is not that important. So if you come from a traditional family, in different cultures where elders' opinions count, or used to count, like Native Americans or people who come from the old world. Sometimes when they come to America, within a generation or so, they become very frustrated because the young people don't listen to them. So that's definitely a change that is not always for the better. So I mentioned to you what's happening in terms of mortality because it should really disturb us. What's happening on the roads, and all these casualties of our youngsters that somehow we got used to it. And it's kind of interesting because we are paying a price for being a Western society. What does it mean? The price that we pay for road accidents, I was told that the injury prevention, I never say accident, road crashes, because it's not an accident. Road crashes, homicide and suicide. In the United States, every year close to 500,000 people die from tobacco-related complications. Close to 90,000 people die from alcohol-related complications. So, but we kind of got used to it. This is almost the price to pay. So when people say, hey, let's legalize marijuana, it's not as lethal as those things. But it's another problem. It's like when President Obama, who usually doesn't talk nonsense, said when he was asked about substance abuse, that marijuana is not as bad as opiates and alcohol. For me, this is a bad answer of the parent. Somebody's going to ask you, what do you prefer that your kids will have, fleas or lice? You want neither. So you can say, hey, this is a little better or this is a little worse than something else. We don't want this. But at the end of the road, now we're circling the wagons. If legalization will be fait accompli, as people advertise it all the time, also in order to convince us, there's going to be, another corner of casualties. And I'm always kind of pleased by the fact that in Vermont, Bernie's backyard, they defeated legalization. They crushed legalization like 120 to 32, even though the governor was pro-legalization. So I don't know how things work. I know that in Connecticut there's a very strong opposition to legalization. Let's see how this is going to work, but this is kind of apropos what's happening with our adolescents. Now, I don't know if any one of you have seen this advertisement. Why do most 16-year-olds drive like they're missing a part of the brain? Because they are missing a part. And that's why we have so many teens who die every year on the road. So So we are trying to understand what are we supposed to do about it and how to address it. So, some information. When people drive drunk, adults, they increase their probability of getting involved in an accident 4 or 5 times. When adolescents drive drunk, they increase their chances 52 times, 10 times more. Why? It has to do with development and maturity in life. So adolescents are more vulnerable than they would like to be. Although, when you go to high school, and we are in high school, adolescents are, they're big, they're tall, they're loud, they're smart, and you kind of feel like, whoa, a little bit intimidated. But they still need the guidance that they don't always want to get, or at least not when other people are looking at. Because as you know, you most probably heard it, the role of parents is to embarrass their adolescent children, right? Not here, don't say it, and stuff like this. So they actually get involved in a lot of precocious behaviors, and some of them get them or other kids in trouble. By the way, I'm not going to talk too much about behavioral addictions, but it's just amazing that technology is advancing at such a fast pace that it's difficult for older people, like some of us, to catch up with this. On the other hand, emotionally, people, and definitely adolescents, don't develop any faster. So, 2 years ago, if somebody would have said vaping, nobody would have known what we're talking about. Now everybody knows about e-cigarettes and vaping.
This guy.
For example, people talk about sexting. Who knew what sexting is 5 years ago? Revenge porno, all kind of terms, and they come every week. And as grown-ups, you look at this, and especially I look at the professors and wow, there's so much work for us because so many behaviors become pathological and difficult to control because technology is very smart, it's very fast, and also it's very small. And so we need to address these issues. And those of you who are counselors, mental health people, and so forth, you see the victims of all this technology-induced trauma and problems that usually starts in adolescence. And it also creates certain norms. And these norms, unfortunately, are not always healthy. Because what's a norm? What's a social norm? If you live in a certain environment and you behave like the way most people behave there, this is the norm. Norm does not mean normal or healthy. Norm means this is the way it is. So let's say 51% of people in your community inject heroin, this is the norm. If 51% smoke marijuana, this is the norm. 51% of adolescents, are engaging in sexting and all kind of other behaviors. It's a problem. It's a problem not just because it's happening. Because I'll give you some examples later on, that certain behaviors are a predicting factor, or if you would like, we like to use the term marker. If you see it at your private kid or with other kids, your elders should kind of stand up and say, wow, this is a warning sign, this is a yellow sign, because this is a pathway. It does not necessarily mean this is the way it's going to happen. In the end, this is an increased probability. For example, energy drinks. Energy drinks are a predictor of stimulant use and drug use later. It's a matter of what you use, and it's also a matter of how much you use. Hypertexting. How many times a day somebody texts, especially young kids, is an indicator for potential involvement. I was sitting on the plane, and in the aisle, and possibly from the aisle was a cute little girl, maybe 2 or 3 years old. It was a very long flight. After 2 or 3 hours that she was on this computer, I was kind of looking at her, and his father looked at me and said, "She bothered you?" I said, "No, but can I ask you a question? I sometimes do this, I know it's not doing it." I said, "Aren't you concerned that she's on this computer game all the time?" He said to me, "I don't know what to do. If I take it away, she starts screaming." So it started at a very early age to set norms of behavior. And this is what I call an electronic pacifier. And it has ramifications and it has implications later on. So we definitely need to be more vigilant right now about all these behaviors, because every week or every month there is something new. It's a very dynamic, fluid situation, and they are kind of playing cops and robbers. We are always behind. Now, there are several issues that we kind of need to pay attention to when it comes to adolescence. You know, the self-evident issue that you're familiar with, which are puberty hormones, and we'll talk about this a little later. Another one that we don't always pay enough attention to is what we call circadian rhythm, or sleep-wakefulness cycles. Your sleep patterns are a great predictor of your mental health. And one of the issues, particularly with adolescents, when they hit puberty, the circadian rhythm changes, become night crawlers. They go to sleep later. Unfortunately, they need to wake up very early. Instead of the little kids go to school early, the adolescents go to school early. So you see them at 6:30 in the morning standing like zombies in the intersection, waiting for the bus. They go to school, they don't wake up until noon, and at 2 they go home. No wonder they don't study. If on top of them they also use marijuana, which affects their concentration, attention, short-term and long-term memory, there's not much to work with. So it's very important to have a good night's sleep. I know I sound like Adam, a school nurse. But the bottom line is that if you have an electronic instrument in your room, like the younger, cell phone, TV, whatever, which robs you from 40 minutes of sleep. 40 minutes is a lot out of the hardly 6 or 7 with most of your sleep. So parents, if you like to think about it, I know many of your kids will scream, but if you start it early, they will know it. When they go to sleep, for 6, 7, 8 years old, phones, come in, daddy, take away the phone. If you have a TV in the room, I don't know, you got a problem. If you don't, that's fine. Take it away. They are not on call, they are not brain surgeons. They are not generals waiting for marching orders. They're just, they are only anxious that at 1 a.m. they're going to miss a stupid text they're going to get from a friend. And this is going to affect us. So this is a very important issue that we need to understand. And there's of course some other kind of behaviors that are important in terms of development. Now, what's happening in puberty? Remember the Major League Baseball steroid fiascos, 75 home runs and whatever. What happens when you're on steroids? You're aggressive, you're irritable, you're all kind of things. So adolescents are irritable, are aggressive because they are on steroids. And that's why, you know, you get up in the morning and you wake up your little darling and she says, I hate you. Well, I didn't do anything. Doesn't matter, I just hate you. That's what she means. I have issues regulating my puberty. And I'm miserable. So you happen to be the first person that I saw this morning. So I hate myself, actually, but I hate you. Because you remind me that I hate myself, right? So kids are on steroids. And this is like 18-fold increase in male testosterone and about 8-fold increase in female, hormones. This is huge. This is a bombardment. So no wonder adolescents are the way they are. Some more, some less, but it affects all of them. And also hormones change all kind of motivation circuits, response to stress, and of course response to all kind of sexual stimuli. So let's talk sex a little bit here, don't worry, I mean we don't need to close the ears of the little ones. What determines the age of sexual interest in boys? The answer is testosterone. So this is biology. You can't deny it. However, with girls it's different. What is the most important factor that determines involvement of girls in sexual activity? These are social norms. Good thing and bad thing. The good thing about it is that you can change social norms and affect, impact behavior. On the other hand, if you are surrounded by some negative influences, people behave differently based on the social norms, and they may put themselves in trouble. So we need to understand these things for two reasons. Reason number one, to know how we can intervene, particularly with girls. And reason number two is also with girls, we need to teach girls a little bit about boys. And this is not written in any book, but in my household, I believe, and that's what I do, that fathers should teach their daughters about boys, because mothers don't know anything about boys. So this is a very important issue to understand how to keep people away from trouble. Once we understand what determines behavior that can be predatory, can be aggressive. When you see, for example, getting back to technology, all this sexting, those who don't know, it's about sending nude pictures. Most of the cases, it's guys putting pressure on girls. The girls do it, which is wrong. And sooner or later, if they're unlucky, and this relationship will end because they will end, because they won't get married at 14 or 15, this picture will find some way into the internet. And it causes great stress, great shame, and even suicidal and harmful behavior. And why do boys do it? For a lot of reasons, but one of them is called revenge pornography. If you don't do as I say, I'm going to make you sorry. And this is a very deviant behavior. As I said, sometimes adolescents try to mimic adult behavior, but they do it wrongly. And since we did not have computers or cell phones when we were adolescents, it's not something we can teach kids, or we could teach kids before. Now when we're aware of it, as parents, as educators, I think that there should be an awareness how negatively young people can use technology. And when people say, oh, technology is great because the brain develops differently and things change, I got it. But technology brings with it a lot of dangers, and we need to understand what they are, because they are victims to the fact that some people find ways to do the wrong thing. The same way that there are hackers, the same way that there are people who can connect to your phone system, to your bank account. There are some problems of adults, but these are the problems of children. And we're still on the learning curve of this matter. And of course, now everything is virtual or extreme. Everything is such on a fast pace that it's really difficult for parents to keep up. I don't know where I saw it, or somebody told me, about this adolescent girl that told her mom, kind of make fun of her, said, you don't know anything about computers. I taught you how to use a computer. Mom said, I taught you how to use a spoon. So, sometimes you need to gain some kind of control, because otherwise, the kids will really put you in the place that you don't want to be. Now, what's really the adolescent brain? The adolescent brain is a blazing apparatus. It is a machine that is being perfected to be prepared for adulthood. So the child or the baby brain is very busy, very condensed, a lot of wires, it's a mess, you don't know what to do. In order to improve effectiveness and save energy, which is really what's important, the adolescent brain goes through several processes. One is pruning. You want to have less wires. And the second one is you want to have addition of white matter, which increases the conduction of brain activity. This is called immunization, in order to make all this stimuli in the brain move very, very fast. So all those things happen all together. And in addition to the puberty aspects, a couple of other things as well, the brain definitely becomes more effective, because at some point, adolescent brain need to get ready for the use of what we call executive functions. able to make decisions, deal with inhibition. Those of you who remember Rudolf Piaget, in order to get your executive functions in place and be able to get into a developmental phase that is very close to the adult phase. Now, it's kind of interesting. Everything in life goes from the beginning to the end. There's one exception to the rule. The brain develops from the back to the front. That's why we, as a very developed species, we are the only species that have cortex. And in the cortex, there's an area they call prefrontal cortex. And I'll tell you about it in a second. And this area develops later, develops between age 15 to 25. That's why adolescent brain is work in progress. And that's why it's not a completed work. And that's why they get into a lot of problems. So, here's the deal. As you can see on the bottom, there is an area that's called the striatum. You also know it as the limbic system, and you also know it as the reward system, and you also know it as the gimme now system. Because this is the area that wants immediate gratification. And most probably every living creature has immediate needs. Food, water, sex, drugs, entertainment. This is the limbic system. This is the fun system. This is the one that when it's being gratified, you feel good. The prefrontal cortex is the area that needs to give it feedback and balance. So, as you can see in children, there is a pressure, but it's a dotted line, so let's call it medium level pressure. And the feedback is also medium level. And what I mean by feedback, don't do it, wait, do it later. Now, if we jump to the adult brain, there is a lot of pressure, and also the control system is shaped, and it's complete. The tragedy with the adolescents is that the pressure is very similar to the adult level. However, the feedback mechanism, the inhibition, is still work in progress. That's why we use the term impulsivity. Adolescents respond very quickly to a stimulus, whether it's a positive or negative stimulus, and that's why we end up with negative consequences. That's why we have the carnage on the roads. That's why we have a lot of behavior that are very impulsive, disinhibited, that get adolescents in trouble. And I can give you a lot of examples and stories about it, but I'll say it to you right now. So this is a very emotional, important issue about the essence of inhibition, because they don't count to three. Not because they don't know how to count to three. So the term that I like to use, sometimes people use the term impulsive behavior. No, the behavior is not impulsive. Once it's a behavior, it's a behavior. What is impulsive is the time between the stimulus and the reaction. The reaction time is very short. And when the reaction time is too short, it means that the adolescent does not have enough time to consider the options. And there are a lot of games and a lot of psychological tests that show it amazingly. It's just the Tower of London and all kind of other things. For example, the kid has 8 minutes to get to a party, and he needs to drive this imaginary car through red lights and green lights. Even in real time, if all the lights will be green, and he or she will drive according to the speed limit, they won't make it, but they still try to do it. So there are kind of examples that immediately expose adolescents. And again, it doesn't matter how smart they are. We know a lot of smart kids that ended up really badly because of this kind of impulsive, disinhibited behavior. And I have all kind of examples here, but maybe I should move on. Something else. Our kids, our adolescents, have something in common with pathological genders who have a disorder. It's called delayed discounting behavior. What does it mean? The problem is that if you're being asked, if you're being told, if you're going to do something, you're going to get the let's say $1 an hour. If you're going to wait an hour, you're going to take $10. Many people who have problem with delayed discounting will take the $1. And you most probably heard about this very famous and very simple study in Stanford 30 years ago, the marshmallow test. Most probably some of you are familiar with it. They found that little kids at age 3 who are able to delay gratification have a better success in life. They're more successful in terms of employment and all kind of other aspects. The test is very simple. You know, they're being given a marshmallow, and they're being told, hold it for a couple of minutes, and if you will, we'll give you more. And they're being watched through a one-way screen, and you see some kids don't eat it and sit like this. Some kids lick it and put it down. Some kids immediately take it. These are the kids that have issues with delayed discounting. So we always look for markers, for predictors of future behavior. This is one of those examples. How inhibition is so important. And that's why adolescents, because of the way their brain is wired, it's difficult for them to be inhibited. And not to mention that there is what we call peer influence or peer pressure, and I have a slide on it. I hope I still have it here. Okay, so I told you about the frontal cortex. So we adults use our prefrontal cortex to its capacity. Many adolescents use the amygdala, which is an area that is much more emotional. That's why many parents are emotional. That's why, for example, when suicidal behavior increases in adolescents, and fortunately sometimes it's based on perceived stress and perceived rejection. You know, somebody thinks or feels that his girlfriend or boyfriend are about to reject them, and the result to self-injurious behavior or to suicidal behavior. Or they feel they're being rejected by a parent, or they're going to get the grade, and they immediately consider the worst option, which is to hurt themselves or hurt others. That happens because of this very, very strong representation of emotionality in adolescence. So there is a very nice book called Smart But Scattered that actually say, I like this term, and I kind of, that's why this slide. As parents, our responsibility is to lend our prefrontal cortex to our kids until they will have enough capacity for themselves. So we are using, you know, our executive functions to work with them. But as I said, if you build trust with your kids at an early age, they may not like what you do, but at least respect what you do. If not, they will not respond well to it, but that increases the chances that they will put themselves in jeopardy. Now, I don't want to complete to talk about those biology. I'll give you one more example, and then maybe we'll address some more questions, some more comments. There's another issue. Another system in the brain is called the system of neurotransmitters. Neurotransmitters are all kind of substances that feed synapses and connect between neurons. So let's make it very simple. Let's say that you have a car, and the car has an accelerator, and the car has a braking system. So the accelerating system is the dopamine, not the adrenaline, dopamine. People want to have a high level of dopamine, even bungee jump. You want the thrill is high dopamine. So you push the pedal to the metal, awesome. The serotonergic system is the representation of the braking system. So you need to have a good braking system. Alas, unfortunately, here's the problem. In adolescence, developmentally, it's nobody fault. It's not your genetic, it's general. The ratio between dopamine products and serotonin product is the highest during human life. Meaning, adolescent is a creature with a car with a very good accelerating system and a defected braking system. So you get on the road with a car that can drive great However, when you need to stop and you don't like to stop because you're adolescent, A, it's too late, and B, your system is not in good shape. And this is another one of those tragedies of being an adolescent, because they're not aware of it, because they think it'll be just fine. See all these adolescents swimming, see Fast and Furious and all kind of other junkie movies, and they're above everybody else. At the end of the day, we look at the statistics. It's horrifying. So you take puberty, you take what's happening in terms of the development of the brain, you look at the prefrontal cortex is still developing, and you look at this ratio, and you want to quarantine your kids until they're going to be 25, right? Because it's scary. Boredom. Okay, usually I have to look at the question. What is the most common complaint by kids? Boredom, right? So let me explain to you biologically what is boredom. Beside one of my heroes, Iggy Pop, I'm bored, I'm the chairman of the board. You don't know the song, I don't know what's wrong. So anyway, here's the deal. The deal is that we need a lot of dopamine to develop the brain, to develop the prefrontal cortex. So we need to take dopamine from the reward system and transfer it to the front. But then we don't have enough dopamine in the back of the brain, and we feel like yucky. I'd like you to erase this word, I didn't say it. You feel it's like sub-threshold depressed because it's not fun to you. So what do you do in order to excite yourself? Bungee jumping, use drugs, you do anything that would enable you to squeeze more dopamine. And that's what's happening with boredom, and that's another reason why adolescents are engaged in high-risk behaviors, because they need their dopamine, because they don't feel good to being like sub-threshold depressed. So that's kind of a very interesting study that actually was done several years ago, and I was really amazed by this finding. Now, not everything is biology. We like to look at biopsychosocial, or if you like ecological. We need to face the fact that not everything is biology, not everything is genetics, and there's also ways how even genetics is affecting our life. Because there's a term called epigenetics, EPI genetics. Me and my bad accent, so my kid says epigenetics. I said, I wish it was happy, but it's not happy. What does it mean? It means that the environment can turn off all kind of genetic processes. So if the environment is hostile, stressful, and problematic, it can change the genetic, if you will, influence and pathway. So, talking about another old-timer, those of you who like mental health literature, Erickson. And Erickson looked at development from childhood through the end of life as a dichotomy of conflict. Meaning you always, in every developmental stage, there's a certain conflict, and if you do well, then you're on one side of the conflict, if not, you're not. For example, what's happening in adolescence, according to Erickson, this is the phase of identity versus identity diffusion. Who am I? What am I? Who are my friends? What is my sexual orientation? What's going to happen in life? I mean, a lot of issues about identity that are not completely sure. And remember, there's this bell curve, so people have all kind of different standard deviation. Anticipation of achievement versus work paralysis, role experimentation, negative identity, leadership polarization, very nice stuff. This is where you as parents and other adults in the community need to be role models so the adolescents will have someone to follow. So let me give you a couple of negative examples from the right and from the left. So this is the first example about President Obama, who had 6, 7 red lines, and none of them worked and none of them was implemented. This is not a good role model, not for our youth, not for our allies, not for anybody. Don't worry, it's getting worse. And this is the next slide. I developed it and I take full responsibility for it. talking about harm reduction, American style, 2016. So we got these two guys, God forbid, only America can afford to have such two candidates. No other country would have even one of them. And this is what we're dealing with. So, these are the role models for our kids. Why would they take us seriously? I don't have a cartoon here of Dick Blumenthal, who thought that he served in Vietnam, and still was elected to be in the Senate. So when we have grown-ups, adults, quote-unquote role models like this of our kids, it's definitely not a good example for them. They become cynical, and also they don't want to listen to us, even to those of us who mean well and hopefully have the credentials for that. This is a book that took me 2 years to read. I do recommend it. It's called Descartes' Bones. You know, Descartes is the philosopher who said, anybody of the adolescents here know what Descartes said? None of you? I started for you. I think, therefore, I am. You can for me. You can do it the other way around. Said I am, therefore I need to think. So this is a book about the history of science in Europe, and it talks about the conflict between faith and reason. How hard we worked for 800 years to develop science. Now instead of faith, we have ideology. I wish I had more time to talk with you about this issue. So it gives another light about what's happening in our country, how much we kind of need to understand conflicts and deal with them in a way that allows us to communicate. So this is a fantastic book written by Russell Shorto. So I'm going to end with some quotes of some smart and funny people, and you can read them all here. And the bottom line is that, you know, there's a lot of knowledge. We just need to understand the knowledge, put it into action, and anybody who challenges it need to come up with a good reason that is not ideological, that is not an adjective. People use adjectives all the time. It needs to be fact-based, it needs to be evidence-based. Otherwise, we have no anchor for our society or for our culture, and then everything is so emotional, everything is in the air. And at the end of the day, I see a lot of confused adolescents. And if I was the Minister of Education, which I'll never be, I would have made it mandatory to have 2 courses. One is history of science, and the second one is logics. I think that these are must. These 2 courses need to be must, courses in high school. Otherwise, our society is not going to end up very well. And one more issue, I hope again with the slide that we've also developed. One of the issues is with our youth networking. As a parent, it's very important for you to know who are the friends of your kids. If you don't know who are the friends of your kids, you're in trouble. And if you know who they are, at least you can intervene, whether they like it or not. You need to know who are the friends of your kids, because your kids don't smoke alone, your kids is not doing all kind of bad things alone. Likewise with positive stuff. You need to surround them with a positive network, because otherwise, you'll be surprised, like many parents I see, that their kid is, got into trouble that they are. I will stop here. I think that's kind of very condensed, and maybe sometimes I'll share some slides later on about marijuana, but I'd like to open the floor for questions or comments or anything you have to say. I hope you're not totally depressed. You're not on self-medicating. Yes.
One is, when you showed your statistics about suicide, thinking life and suicide, are there trends that are changing over time to make suicide percent?
I understand. There's a question about suicidal behavior.
So my question is, you showed some statistics
Yeah.
about suicidal behavior, and I'm wondering whether that has changed over time.
Right. Okay. Unfortunately, since most probably 2008, 2009, after 10 years of decreasing the rate of suicidal behavior, it has increased quite dramatically. Actually, people don't talk about it for some reason. I don't know why. It's not completely clear why. We can speculate. Some people say, well, it's related to the financial crisis. Other people might say, well, it's related to the fact that drug use is so high. There's all kind of explanations. I'm not completely sure what is going on, but definitely there is an increase in suicide, and it has been quite dramatic. But again, suicide is one of those behaviors that people don't want to talk about, and it's very hush-hush. And out of fear, out of respect, out of anxiety, and it's definitely something that needs to be addressed. We also know, in terms of talking about substance abuse, that any psychiatric disorder increases the likelihood of suicidal behavior, and this also includes substance use disorder. And the majority of completed suicide, there is a psychiatric problem. A lot of people don't want to mention it because they feel that maybe it sounds like, quote unquote, putting the victim in bad light. We need to understand that suicidal behavior usually happens in a certain context, and particularly completed suicide. And there is a certain technique that people have been using for many years. It's called psychological autopsy, trying to understand what happened to the victim, interviewing the family, interviewing friends, and try to find out what happened. Usually it's not out of the blue, even though sometimes parents, being taken by surprise, and then they found out actually that there have been some things happening, but they were not aware of. Yes.
How can we as a community deal with stigma? Because I see stigma as the main reason why we're not dealing with a lot of these things. Nobody wants to talk about it.
Yeah. I'm not sure that I'll be able to give you a great answer. I know that, anyone who has been or is a parent of kids know that there's all kind of cliquish behavior, that sometimes your kid gets stuck in the middle of it, whether because they did something or maybe because they didn't do something. And kids, because they are relatively immature, empower themselves by preying on somebody who, becomes victimized. And it gives them a certain power, unfortunately. And that's why you have all this paradigm of bullying and victimizing and bullying of those who are victims, and so on and so forth. And I'm sure that we all try to explain to kids, don't do to others what you don't want to be done to you, and we need to keep on doing it again and again and again. Something that I'm not in favor of, and maybe it will put me, in an awkward position. I know that people like, how do you call them, emotional speakers. All those people who come and are very charismatic, like being in a Baptist church, and they talk about emotive speakers. They came to school in our area, and kids stood up, like instead of saying hallelujah, said, I'm a bully, I'm a bully. I'll never do it again. 2 days later, the kids bullied my son. So it's almost like this, when you go to see a good movie, a good show, or you sing a song that makes you feel very good. And for that moment, it's great. But psychiatry and psychology is a term called working through. You need to work again and again and again and again until people will get it, not just in terms of insight, but it won't be like a second habit or a knee-jerk that they respond this way to different people. And it's a very interesting experience. I tell my kids, something that happened to me a couple of months ago. I went to New Zealand for 2 weeks. If any one of you will ever have a chance, this is the most beautiful country in the world. 500,000 people live on an area that is the size of Japan, 120 million people, very clean, beautiful, amazing. And if you also go to the ring fan, oh man, very nice. However, it was really interesting because the driver on my bus was transgender. And I never met a transgender. I'm a professional. Never talked with a transgender. And I was never interested in anything. And here comes this guy who's actually a lady. And he looks like, it's pretty clear what he is, but he's a she, and his name is Rachel. And even when he had the time psychiatrist, we kind of became friends. He gave me a card, he has a book, and I'm sorry I lost the card. I wanted to buy the book. It's called My Journey from a Country Boy to a City Girl. Very, very interesting. So after spending a few days with Rachel, I started to feel comfortable. So the question is, how do you deal with this when you are with people that you don't feel comfortable with, and then you tend to be negative toward them? So that's actually how do we deal with the stigma issue? And maybe we need to do all kind of case discussions over this matter, because let's face it, people are different, people have different preferences and different traditions and values, and this is part of all these rapid changes that we go through in this country, in other countries, that make people become the war people. They don't want all these changes to come at them so fast. That's what's happening right now in the United States, Brexit, France, other places. It's almost like people say, whoa, don't impose this on me. Let me do it at my own time, pace. And the question is, how do we negotiate it between the two sides? But since we don't do it, we push. Say, oh, you're terrible, you voted for Trump, or you're an idiot, you voted for Bernie. This is not how you're going to make people change. The issue is, let's work on the common denominators, not on the differences. My advice, I mean, it won't be accepted because United States of America is to move to a parliamentary approach. Why? Because there can be just two parties. They don't represent everyone. It's more difficult to govern when you have too many parties like some of the European countries, but at least it allows more people to express themselves. Otherwise, a lot of people feel very alienated. And this alienation causes all kinds of behaviors. So again, I don't think there are easy responses or answers, but it's all about negotiations. People need to negotiate. Because anybody who says, I've got the truth, God is on my side, I love Bob Dylan and stuff like this, at the end of the day, it doesn't work. Because there's always different camps. So, I don't know exactly what to do with stigma. I think we all, if you think about it, belong to minority groups. For example, I belong to a minority group called Accent Challenge. You know, there's all kind of things that makes us different from each other. The question is, do we take the best out of it, or we don't? And how do we deal with things we don't feel comfortable with? I think it's okay to talk about something you don't feel comfortable with. And the difficulty is that people immediately throw at you adjectives, and then you don't want to mess with them. I'll give you another example. I spoke with my son, who's a junior in high school, and he's watching every word that I say and corrects me all the time, politically correct. So we talked about, I told him about this transgender experience and stuff, and then we talked about people who are transgender, but they are both. And he said, oh, there's a name to this. It's called gender fluidity. He said, never heard about this. Can you define it? He said, no, I can't define it, and the fact that you even ask it is hostile. So I went to John Christensen, who is an expert that stores on gender issues. And by the way, there is a website, it's called yellowbrick.me. John Christensen and Matt Connell from West Hartford developed it. It's a great website for family issues and questions and stuff. And I said, John, can you help me? I'm in trouble at home. He said, what? Can you define to me what is gender fluidity? He said, I don't know. So you see, people come with new definitions, and you're afraid to ask because if you ask, it shows that you're either ignorant or anti-something. That's not the way to do it. The way is to ask. If I don't know something, I usually ask. So I think this is also a way to deal with stigma. Why do people have such a stigma? And I know that I have some maybe suggestion that might be too bold for principals of schools. For example, I'm Jewish, and my kids have experienced anti-Semitism here and there, like little things. And I came to school and I said, look, I would like to have a class on anti-Semitism. And I'd like to know truly what people think about the reasons for anti-Semitism, which is the mother of all bigotry. And why do they think what they think? And let's negotiate. And we'll go back all the way to Jesus and go through all the historical facts why anti-Semitism was developed by the church for very, very good reasons of control. To understand why people are being poisoned at such an early age. I said, this is too much. I said, look, it's like surgery. If you don't go to the source of the problem, what you're doing basically is denial and avoidance. Having what they call, what's called Humanity Day, they bring speakers from all kind of, ways of life, and they talk about the kumbaya and how to tolerate people. I don't want just tolerance, I want understanding. Because tolerance is not enough. Tolerance means I'm not going to do it because I'll get in trouble. I like understanding. So understanding aspects such as stigma definitely takes some kind of executive function. Something you most probably can talk about in high school, because kids in middle school still not developed enough to deal with this issue. But I think that it's a fascinating issue. Make it a little bit more scientific, then perhaps it will become more of a challenge. So I'm kind of brainstorming with you because I've been through these things. And I stood up for my kids. And principals felt very uncomfortable that I'm confronting them because many people say, let's not say anything. Let's not cause the problem, it will go away. No, it will not go away. And these kids will continue to behave like this. But my kids are no slouches. I said, hey, I said to a principal, I gave my son permission to break a nose if it's going to happen again. He said, you can do that. I said, I just did. And if you think that this is worse than what he's been through, we can debate it, because I don't want them to come home and say, because I'm being bullied for something I didn't do. What can I do if I was born black, Jewish, or I don't know, whatever, Red Sox fan? I mean, it is what it is. I know this is Yankees land. Yes.
Just a question related to where you were saying if you could develop the curriculum, you would say all kids, they would have to take a class on like scientific theory. I don't remember exactly what you had called it. And I know that something that's discussed a lot in society, in politics. I've had the discussion, I'm also Jewish, and I've had this discussion, with my Jewish friends, with my Christian friends, about the, kind of the, I'm like an analyst. I believe if, whatever the facts are. I believe in climate change. I believe, I think that the universe is billions years old. But
You don't say believe, it's not believe, it's convinced.
I am convinced.
Because believe is my belief,
Yes.
I know
Yes.
that planet is changing based on facts.
Right. The facts have led me to the understanding that that's
You do believe.
that's what I believe. But I know that there are not everybody shares my love of science and research and looking at facts first. And I know that faith is the idea of believing in something in absence. You don't need evidence to have faith. That's, I guess, the premise of it. But is that something that contributes to children? They don't necessarily have the reasoning capability, and so for a child who says, okay, well, in synagogue, I'm learning this is what the religion is telling me is true, or in CCD classes, I'm learning that this is true, and then they have some conflict because they're saying, okay, I'm getting one thing from my faith-based education, I'm getting something else maybe from my secular-based education, and does that contribute to some of, these behaviors trying to make sense out of that?
Sure. I think, there'll be a debate between two model orients. So, very practical. One believes in God, the other one does not. I don't think everything needs to be dichotomous. I know when my son came to me and told me, prove to me that there is God. And I said to him, look, this is the wrong question. What I can tell you is that God has a role in your traditions and in the rituals of the religious you belong. And it does not matter how you define it and what is your religion. You can live in peace with God and with technology and with science. That's what I said to my son. It's not the point to say, are you a creationist or you are, a Darwinist? We know the answer, but the bottom line is we need to be inclusive. Because if you're not inclusive, then everybody feels that they're being stigmatized. Because suddenly you say, wait a minute.
There are some people who complain right now that they cannot worship their religion because the government interferes with their religion. For example, the contraception issue and stuff. I think that the bottom line is negotiation, and explain to our kids that we don't want to do everything in terms of black and white unless somebody is, for me, the red line or the line in the sand if this leads to hate crime. Even The Economist, which is a newspaper that I recommend everybody to read if you want to know what's happening in the world, it's a little bit left of center, but it doesn't matter if you're left or right, you can understand it. Said something very interesting about kind of all this hate issue. It said, I am entitled to insult you. I'm not obliged to do that. So if I'm calling your name, I'm not a nice person. But it does not mean this is hate crime. Hate crime is saying something that directly lead to segregation, hurtful behavior, and so on and so forth. So when I talked about stress, if somebody calls your name at playground, that's not a reason, for, World War III. But we teach our kids about tolerance and about not necessarily accepting but tolerating other people's behavior and views as long as they are not toxic. And this is kind of scary because, quite frankly, both on the right and the left, we hear expressions that cannot be tolerated. They are being tolerated because we have no choice. But both on the Democratic side and on the Republican side, and I'm trying to be as objective as I can, you hear some things that are beyond not being nice. They are really beyond being hurtful. They are very close to hate, or hateful. And that's why I think it's very difficult right now to raise kids in the United States when you sit around the dinner table and the kids watch TV and say, I can't believe this is happening. Are these the people that I showed you this slide? These are the best two candidates we had. Usually I try to make everything funny. I said, it shows you how strong America is. It doesn't matter who's the president and who's running for presidency. America will manage with or without this guy or that lady. But come on, guys. Don't you think that in order to get the most important job in the world, we need a job description and some interviews? Each one of us need to go through an interview and write a resume. And I remember kind of watching the Republican, at least you can say the Republican, at least there was a playoff. And I said, Norman, give me Norman, give me Norman. And then I looked at the Democrat and said, I can't believe these are the candidates. This is a joke. So, we are paying the price, we'll get over it, but the bottom line is what's going to happen to us as people and as a community, and all this hateful behavior on both sides of the aisle, that's definitely a problem. And we have so many other things to do right now. There's so many other things we need to correct, but there's no time for them because everybody is fighting with everybody else about what happened in the past and who said what. It's almost like kindergarten. That's really good. So that's the only suggestion I can give. Negotiate, listen to other people, and don't block people either from the right or the left from expressing their opinion. There was this event in Vermont, I think. Somebody came to talk and students attacked him and there was some casualties and things are really getting bad. I think that part of free speech is listen to what you don't want to listen, or at least if you don't want to listen, go away and let the people who want to listen, because people are entitled to their opinions. So that's kind of what I'm addressing.
Hi, Dr. Kaminer. I was hoping that you could talk about the impact of early substance use in terms of how the brain develops and rates of addiction. There's a lot of common belief, and I know I do a lot of education in my clinical practice, of that alcohol, drinking alcohol and now smoking marijuana are not really a rite of passage. And there is this belief that it's part of what adolescents do. And I know when I was talking to people about coming to this presentation, one of the things that I was saying is we know a lot more now about brain development than we did when we were kids. And so there's a lot of medical evidence that really looks at the earlier use and the impacts on the
Sure.
brain. So I was hoping you might touch
Well,
on
I have
that.
a slide, I don't have it here, but the chicken and the egg, because it's a chicken and the egg, if you look at the title of this evening, is the brain development impact on development of harmful behavior. You can also look at harmful behavior effect on the development of the brain. Because the brain is still developing, the earlier you expose it to toxic components, and I have some slides on this, the higher is the likelihood that bad things are going to happen. And there's some slides that I can show you that when you expose a brain of an adolescent rat to adult rat to nicotine, I mean, what happens later? I mean, in terms of effect. And actually, it takes an adolescent human 3 to 5 cigarettes of nicotine to become addicted. Nicotine is extremely powerful. And that's one of the problems we have, for example, right now, with e-cigarettes, that 50% of the kids who use e-cigarettes would have never thought to smoke a cigarette. Now they become addicted to nicotine. And the earlier you start to use any kind of substance, the higher the likelihood you become dependent. Alcohol and marijuana as well. One of the problems we see that the age of marijuana users, first-time users, is going down. And here's the problem. I'm not going to show you the slideshow. The most important question is, does legalization or liberalization of the laws regarding marijuana affect marijuana use in adolescents? The answer is absolutely yes, based on a lot of studies and from reliable sources, not a lot of kind of pro-legalization camp. I'm just a scientist. I'm a clinical scientist. I just deal with the facts. They found that basically, even decriminalization, and it doesn't matter politically if it's right or wrong, from public health perspective, decriminalization causes a 5-year increase in the use of marijuana until it plateaus. Why? Because the most important reason why kids use marijuana is their perception of harmfulness, which goes down. And when those who already use marijuana, the legal system doesn't bother them. They'll keep using it anyway. Those who are on the fence and have not decided to use, one of the reasons they don't use yet is because they know that it's illegal, which means there's a problem. When you interview kids, or if you see what's happening in Colorado and Washington, legalization of marijuana increases the perception of harmlessness and the fact that it's no big deal, and more kids going to experiment with it. Furthermore, not only will there will be an increase until it will plateau, there is also a decrease in the age of first-time use of marijuana. And that's really a huge, huge factor, because the earlier kids start to use marijuana, the higher the likelihood they'll become dependent, which is 2 to 3 times more of adults. Because the brain is still it's like clay, you can play with it. All kind of pathways develop. The brain is kind of silly what I'm going to say, right? It's almost like Ovid and the Ovid. The brain is very smart, So the brain is being exposed once or twice to something, it immediately develops certain pathway, it recognizes it. It's like a smartphone. When everybody's following you. Once or twice use the smartphone, go to a certain app or a certain link. You just used the first letter, the phone takes you there even if you don't want to go there. That's how it works. The brain is doing the same. So it's almost like a crate that waits for the water, for the flood to come. And as soon as there's flood, it will go in this certain pathway. So you can be 30 years in jail, hopefully none of you, and you haven't used cocaine, you get out of jail, you drive on the street where your dealer used to deal, and you feel the craving, because the extinction is not complete. So basically, you expose your brain to a certain behavior. It even happens, by the way, not just on pathological level. I always tell people, you need to differentiate between habit formation and addiction. What's habit formation? Your kid is not going to sleep before he or she is going to get a story, bedtime story. Milk and cookies, it's habit formation. So you need it, you get used to it, and then you need to extinct it in order not to do it, but it's still there. That's why people who go to AA use the term that, you're in recovery. You're not cured, because alcohol by itself is such a powerful stimulus. Once you're exposed to it, it's very difficult to say no. So that's actually what's happening in terms of exposing the young brain to drugs. And I know a lot of people say, wait a minute, not everybody or anybody uses marijuana or alcohol become an alcoholic. That's true, but it's biopsychosocial. There are some people with biological vulnerability, and sometimes you don't know that you have it. Like, for example, we know that early onset of marijuana use increases the likelihood of developing psychosis, and we've done a review on this. So people say, oh, it's only for people who have schizophrenia, the family. I said, no, it's not. Because definitely, if there is psychopathology of this kind in your family, using drugs is a bad idea. It also happens to people whom you don't know if they have any vulnerability. Almost similarly to peanut butter or to peanuts or to bee stings, that you don't know that you are allergic to it. When you don't encounter the allergen, nothing happens. When you have the encounter, the anaphylactic shock happens or the psychotic behavior happens. So, as we say, users or smokers, beware, because you don't know what's going to happen. It's a numbers game. Yes.
Could you speak a little bit to the complications of marijuana use and alcohol use for students who may be taking medication?
What kind of medication?
Could be ADHD, could be mood stabilizer, but there's a lot of our kiddos now who are taking medication. And could you speak to how that may, as fragile as the adolescent brain is now, what complications may arise should students be prescribed this medication and also then elect to either drink or use marijuana?
Well, it's a complex question about drug interactions or drug medication interaction, because in terms of medication, I know we have an internist here, maybe she left already, still around?
Dr. Hunter.
Dr. Hunter?
Stay over there.
Oh, you're an expert on this most probably. All this issue about the drug medication interaction, whether they compete on certain enzyme systems that break them down. I know years ago I did a review on marijuana and some medication, and actually I found that the impact on made tricyclics, which most people don't use anymore, antidepressants, more toxic. Are you aware, based on your experience in terms of alcohol and marijuana and any kind of those medications, in terms of interactions, maybe you're more qualified?
Just that it can make your reaction to alcohol more profound, because it's more unpredictable. If you're on a medication that has the interaction with metabolism, that is more unpredictable how you're going to react to a beer or what's going to happen. And so you're kind of playing already.
Well, many medications, definitely, it's not recommended. I can tell you, for example, that people who take antipsychotic medications, if they smoke cigarettes, the cigarettes actually, the nicotine interacts with the medication because it competes on the receptors post-synaptic receptors, and the medication is less potent. So sometimes there's this competition that makes the medication less potent, so the medication is or are not doing what they are supposed to do. I definitely think that the recommendation would be not to use drugs and alcohol when you take almost any medication, but you know, it's tough to convince them not to do it, but it's definitely something that should be considered. Another issue, though, is that a lot of kids who get ADHD medication, unfortunately, divert them. About 22% of kids who have ADHD divert the stimulants. It's not a major high, those who have tried Ritalin, but it's definitely not recommended if you don't want to take it. It's kind of interesting. We are moving into a new phase right now. It's just amazing. Talking about medical marijuana, although we don't have time to talk about this aspect, but even ketamine that people have used, but now in small dosage, people use it for depression that are resistant to treatment, or even Ritalin. People, there's some new studies that they provide it as a substitute to cocaine addiction, because this is a stimulant. I mean, there's a lot of kind of aspect. Those of you students who are interested in pharmacokinetics and pharmacodynamics, there's a lot of very interesting things happening right now with some drugs of abuse that might be used therapeutically, but at very different dosage, and it's still in process, but that's definitely where the field is going right now. Now you know everything, yes.
Hello. Could you touch upon the opiate epidemic and why it's happening in the United States but not elsewhere in the world, which is what you said earlier?
Well, if you ask Nora Volkov, and I know respect to Nora Volkov, she said, well, it's catching up in other places, but it's not as bad. I think that we have like a perfect storm here. Very powerful pharmaceutical companies that have provided a lot of incentives to physicians and nurses who prescribe, and it really created what we call the pill mills. In some states, like Florida, if you read newspaper Florida, it has become really endemic there. And I don't know if you remember in Connecticut last year, unfortunately there was a doctor and nurse that were like among the top 10 in the nation, like writing like hundreds and hundreds of prescriptions of specific painkillers. And only lately, I mean, people realize after we have all these casualties, I mean, we expect this year to have 52,000 ODs. 52,000 people are going to die in the United States. It's unfathomable from overdosing. So now, we're starting to crack down on those physicians and providers, and also to crack down on the pill mills. Also, it's kind of interesting that there are some states that are in much better shape. I just saw a report, unfortunately, we are ranked third worst in the country. Ohio 11.1%, Indiana, and we are number 3. And actually among the top 10, there are at least 5 New England states. I don't know why, but this is one aspect. The other aspect is that fentanyl, which is a synthetic opiate, it's being produced usually in China and being smuggled by the drug cartels. Every now and then there's a fentanyl epidemic because it imitates heroin, but it's 50 times stronger than heroin, so it's more lethal. And sometimes they lace it with heroin. By the way, they also lace it with marijuana and with some other stuff. So the young people using marijuana don't know what else is laced with. So fentanyl has been responsible also for an increase in ODs. As of last week, again, I told you this is it's a great field to be in because there's so much dynamic, so much action going on. There's a new agent. I wonder if any one of you heard about it. I just read it about it last week. in the Wall Street Journal. It's called carfentanil, C-A-R fentanyl. It's 100 times stronger than fentanyl. You touch it, you die. And again, it's being produced in China, and the US administration has been putting a lot of pressure on the Chinese to crack down on it. So there's a lot of poison, very powerful poison out there. And people who are using stuff, the usual heroin, it's like your unusual cup of coffee, they just die like flies. So it's a multi-layer issue. Now let's get to the adolescent issue. Because everybody talks about pain medications. Most adolescents who use heroin in over the counter, and all kind of opioid medication like Oxycontin and heroin, whatever, they don't suffer from chronic pain. Okay, let's face it. This is good for adults who complain about chronic pain. What happens? They start with alcohol, marijuana, and they're looking for a better high. So they're being told, take a little bit of this, take a little bit of that, and this is a slippery slope. Just to let you know that last year in Connecticut, 75 young people died from use of opioid. This is a small state, 75. It's way, way more than young people who die from car accidents. It used to be like, the usual bad stuff. So basically, on the statistic I showed you, we now have people who OD, their number is higher than people who die in car crashes in the United States. And the big numbers are generally about 30,000 people who die from firearms. And I don't like to call it accidents either. But 36,000 people die from car crashes. And I think like this year, the number more or less, it's around 42,000 OD. These are numbing numbers. And it's going to take us a while until, there are going to be some changes. It's a very slow process. But this is in a nutshell where all the things kind of culminate. Yes?
You had said that experimentation was a rite of passage for adolescents.
Sorry, can you say what?
If you said experimentation is a rite of passage, what is healthy experimentation?
Right question. Many adolescents see experimentation of anything as rite of passage, and they're most probably going to tell you, hey, you've done this, you've done this, why can't I do it? But there are definitely casualties. Unfortunately, most of the experimentations are with behavior that are adult-like. But adolescents, because of their emotional makeup, don't do it right. For example, let's talk about relationship. Relationship in high school. Usually, it's very common that when there are relationships, they are in high school. But it becomes so, trying to find a nice word. You can go to high school 1, 2, or 3, or 4 years and end up dating so many of your friends, ex-girlfriend and ex-boyfriend. It's become so incestuous and it's so unhealthy in this way. And these are people who live in the same environment and see each other every day. As a grown-up, you have a relationship, it doesn't work, too bad, people separate, and most of the time they have the right not to see each other. If you live in a town, there's only one high school or one area, and you got in trouble talking about the stigma stuff, it's a never-ending story. So I cannot say, hey, don't have a relationship because nobody's going to listen to me anyway. But I think that if you explain to people, again, if I had my own high school, it would have looked very differently. I would have taught kids not about how babies come to the world. That's no big deal. It takes 5 minutes. I would tell them about the meaning of relationship. How do you form relationship? What are the pros and the cons? How to handle it? Because the first boy or girl you're going to date, you're not going to marry him or her and have 12 kids. This eventually is going to end. And then my daughter kind of says to me, you're so unromantic.
Listen, darling, this is what's gonna happen sooner or later, you know, so get ready for this. And then you multiply it, it's like an echo chamber, because, you know, now when I'm in and I know what's going on in the school, because my kids go to school, and I try to understand, he who dated him, or she who dated her, and he who dated her, and now you dating with him, and it's a never-ending story, and it's a mess, it's a total mess. So they go through it, but they better be ready for the pain associated with it, the difficulties associated with it, the cliquish aspect associated with it. Experimentation in itself, it's most probably has a connotation of you about to try something that could be exciting and interesting, but might get you or somebody else in trouble. That's kind of the way
I could say, my daughter is 14, she's a freshman here, and we had this conversation right before we left the house. The perception among her, I'd say like the freshmen, sophomores at least, sex is no big deal. It's just no big deal. People do it in the school, they do it in the janitor's closet, they do it underneath the stage where the orchestra plays. That and I keep telling her, it is a big deal. I know everybody says it's not, but it is. You may like physically, it's no big deal, but there's a huge emotional side to it, and they just don't get that.
Well, that's why I'm mentioning
terrifying.
It's very important to talk about social norms in adolescence. We need to change the curriculum. The curriculum is being imposed on us. Or if anyone here is a parent of a kid who goes to college, first year of college is a zoo. It's a total zoo. There are many kids who feel that we're out of home, we can drink, we can drug, we can swear, we can fornicate, we can do whatever we want. What about studying? I'm not sure if there's the time for it, because I do it also all the time, and I see college students, and there's so much pressure. Talk about depression in college, talk about sexual harassment in college. There's so many issues that need to be handled. I would like to see these issues addressed so much earlier, even in middle school, because people, you know, in puberty in middle school, and understand the relationship aspects and the impact that it has on each and every one of our kids. And hopefully some people will understand it and deal with it, and also there's going to be a better support system in terms of watching people's back. Like I know in West Hartford, there are 2 high schools, and they made these movies about what happened when you go to a party. So if you're a girl, you go to a party, you never go alone. You go with another girl who's going to watch your back. And there's been some video that shows, yes, you go with another girl, but she's peeping you. So many things are happening. But the bottom line, in order to talk about healthy relationship, healthy behavior, we need to start in middle school. And beyond where babies come from and all this stuff, that's easy. The bottom line is how to address relationship, and then add this technological aspect that people are abusing quite extensively. And I think we need to make changes. And if it doesn't fit into the curriculum, maybe it could be part of club activity, or ask the students what they think about it, because here I am preaching as an expert so many years on adolescents, but the bottom line is we cannot do anything without you guys. You need to come up with a certain idea or solution, how to protect each other and how to protect people who end up getting, as you said, the wrong idea that, hey, everybody does it. Everybody smokes, everybody drinks, everybody does this, everybody does that. Yes, over there.
Just before you ask your question, I just wanted to say I'm aware of our time, so I want this, if it's okay, to be our last question, because we do want to make sure that everyone has a few minutes to fill out an evaluation form. So please make sure before you leave and after this last question that you complete an evaluation form and leave it somewhere on the table by the door.
I'm very pleased that most people stay to still asking questions. That's what this is all about, you know. But yes, over there.
For some reason, I don't know, I graduated from this high school in 2014, but I think it was when I was either in 7th or 8th grade, sex ed got cut from one of our curriculums, but instead we had one portion of, maybe it was like our sophomore gym class that went over sex ed for like a portion of the semester, but we didn't actually get a class entirely based off of like sex ed. And then when I was like a freshman, and I know other like girls that didn't really like have moms growing up or in that moment, and like none of us really got sex ed because of when it got cut, and we just really had that one class that didn't really cover much really important things, I guess, like for women at least. So that's like something like.
Well, what's happening, the superintendent every place, they have a lot of pressure, they need to go through the Board of Education and all this curriculum. Nobody's daring to think outside of the box. They hate me when stuff. Because they travel all the time, that's why I go other places. Because they don't want to listen. They only listen after there is a tragedy or something bad happens, and we unite and we take care of it. Prevention is better than damage control.
Right. But my question is, do you think sex ed is something that more of your parents should cover, or something that should be highly integrated into education to compensate for it, or do you think it's more of a 50-50?
First of all, parents should cover anything they can cover. In my opinion, nobody should tell them what to do because whose kid is it anyway? It's not, the kid doesn't belong to the state like the way they think in Connecticut.
Yeah.
All parents are terrible, so they don't know what to do. Then the kids end up in DCF, and then you know what's happening to them. I hope that parents will do anything, that they can, and if they feel they need some help, maybe they can consult with someone. But I think there should be some aspect that should be covered in school because it has to do with safety and health education. And, I would like to see school as one-stop shop. But there are different approaches in different townships. What is the role of school? Some principals just want to teach and educate. But most of our kids spend most of the wakeful hours, if they're awake, hopefully, in school. So I think they should get most of the services they can get in school. And hopefully the school will get more funding to address these issues. Or maybe parents or donors will provide this, this financial support.
Thank you.
All right, thank you.